Hello, and welcome to Sip of Sunshine, the podcast focused on all things send, where no topic is out of bounds. I'm your host, Kat, and on today's episode, I'm chatting to the amazing Kelly, our Head of Advocacy, and our incredible Welsh-based advocate, Rachel. We will be discussing the differences between the English and Welsh law, how working remotely can be a benefit to everyone, and also, as requested by the Sunshine Academy community, the silliest things we've heard an LA say. So kick back, relax, and we'll get started. Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Sip and Sunshine. Welcome back, Kelly.
Hey, I'm so excited. Thanks.
We love having you. We really do. And a big welcome to Rachel, who's joining us for the first time today. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm loving it.
So I'm going to be learning a lot today because you know a lot about Welsh law and I know nothing about Welsh. Do you want to explain a little bit about what you do for Sunshine?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm an ALN advocate from Sunshine and I live in South Wales. I've been in advocacy a long time and I've got a lot of experience with education issues here in Wales, social care, PIP tribunals, lots of different experiences that I've brought to Sunshine in the last few months, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a great team.
It is a great team, and it's fantastic that you're part of it as well. You've been such a really great addition.
Oh, thank you.
To begin with, then, just because we've mentioned it, let's talk about the top 3 differences between the English law and the Welsh law. Differences between English and Welsh law. What would be your number 3? What's the one that's like not huge but just enough of a difference to sometimes be like, oh, that's strange?
Oh, the biggest one.
Strange.
Strange.
Why is it not the same?
Yeah.
That's the bit I don't understand. I don't understand why it's not exactly the same.
Where the biggest, or the main one I say, is obviously the different legislation it's under. So obviously England, which I've loved learning a lot about the English law and the differences. But for me, yeah, it's obviously the Children and Families Act and the SEND Code of Practice for England. But in Wales here, it's the ALN and ETW, the Education Tribunal Wales Act 2018. So that's the main difference, obviously. I think the biggest.
No, you go, because it's even ALN is different, isn't it?
The terms, yeah.
Yeah.
So we used to use SEN, England, the special education. No, it's additional learning needs now. So it's even the term for that is completely different. And even though the principles, I think the aim of the Welsh Government were for them to be similar, they're not. And I don't know, I can't yet, it's still early, but I can't yet say if it's better. I think the aim is for it to try and be simpler process and to be easier. And I think the biggest thing I see is that anybody with an additional learning need can get an IDP.
Yeah, and
does it happen?
And an IDP is essentially, well, on paper, it's essentially VP, but the process by which an IDP is handled is slightly different. So obviously in England, if you have sort of what's called SEND support, which is the type of support that you get at school that doesn't require an EHC plan, and then if that sort of isn't enough, then there are legal methodologies to then apply for an education healthcare plan, which is like a step up from that. Whereas in Wales, it's all one thing, it's all an IDP. But and in the first case, isn't it right, Rachel, that the school maintains the IDP, and then it only then goes to a next stage if, again, that's not sufficient.
Yeah.
But in the first instance, you don't have to apply for an IDP individual development plan, do you? You don't have to apply for one in the same way that you have to apply for an EHC needs assessment.
No, you just ask the school. You approach the school in the majority of cases, yeah. And that's one of the other differences is the majority of them are maintained and enforced by the school, which I just think it leaves it open. For me, I think it leaves the difference. The difficulty is the relationship between parents and that school is very fractious. Then there's it's not good.
That's what I was going to ask. So here, if you approach the school, sometimes that can cause problems straight from the get-go. Not every time, but sometimes. Is it more of an open process in Wales? Do the schools welcome that? I've noticed this about my child, or do they push back quite often?
It varies. They can be good, that the communication can be open, but I think in England you're protected by the local authority. So if the school are not maybe supporting appropriately, you've got the local authority. Now you still have that in Wales, but then you've got to officially ask the local authority to take over and maintain the IDP.
And so process. Sorry, Kelly.
No, I was going to say it's really complicated then, because not only then are you potentially having a difference of opinion with a school. So you're saying, hey, look, the IDP that you've written for my child may not be fit for purpose. So you have to have that difficult conversation. And then you have to try and convince the local authority of that fact too. When I don't know what it's like for you, Rach, but I know in England, the authorities are really overstretched. Yeah. And they don't have enough caseworkers, and the caseworkers are really, really stressed out. So I don't know if it's the same, but they're not going to just be dishing out IDPs maintained by the local authority just willy-nilly, are they? No. So you're going to have that initial difficult school and a difficult conversation with the local authority who may not want to take on that IDP because the school is currently managing it. So that's hard for a parent, right?
It's really difficult, really, really hard. And very often the only resolution is to take it to a tribunal. And that's where you feel it's really tough. Even, so they'll take it to panel. They'll take it to panel whether the local authority will maintain it. And then you've got that time, and then they'll come back, and then it's really back and forth and quite a lot of delay. If the IDP is well written, and I've seen a few good ones, it works great. So when they're done right, it's really, really good, and the support is great. The biggest frustration I see, so in England, you can get, it's a statutory right, isn't it, to get the educational psychologist involved. That isn't so in Wales. It's not statutory. So there's a really nice section 20 of the ALN Act, where it states that if the child is likely, the woolly, lovely words we like in Sunshine, likely to benefit from a referral to other services, then they can do it. But it's a suggestion, and it's more of a guidance rather than a right.
Is that the case as well? Is that the case as well? Is that the case as well if the local authority does take for an IDP?
Yeah.
Is there no requirement for them to actually get educational psychology advice?
No.
Whoa. So that really then is a crazy position if we think about it, because if you are a parent and you're the expert when it comes to your child, and you say, hey, my child has additional learning needs, ALN, and they need ALP, additional learning provision, I don't really agree with what the school think my child needs because of things like masking and, all of those things that we know about. If the school just goes, oh, hey, we know best at the end, go away, there's no requirement to have external eyes on that whole situation. So what gives parents then? Do they just have to go out and pay for their own private reports all the time?
Very much so in a lot of cases, which leaves there's a real difficulty then, isn't it? Because they know financially a lot of people are not able to do that. I do, if I have meetings with a lot of parents, and I've done it over the last 8 years, with education, and I go into a lot of schools, I have to say, if I request it and give reasons for it and use the Act, then I can't actually recall that I've ever been refused that. So they do, you can ask the school, and you can come in and good local authority ed psych reports, or speech and language, or even OT. You can get them, but it's I get told a lot that parents do struggle to get that. So they ask in schools, and that's no, we don't think you need it. I think the biggest, what I'm seeing is specialist teachers are responsible for doing this. And as great as a specialist teacher is, and I'm not knocking them because they're brilliant, they're not an educational psychologist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
particularly then, because there's a bit of cart before the horse, isn't there, a little bit? Because say if you thought that an environment was fundamentally wrong for a person, and that school didn't believe they were, anything that goes into an IDP in terms of provision is therefore going to be limited to what that environment can offer. There's no sort of, right, this environment might not be right, and therefore you need this additional or other provision. It's just like, well, this is what we offer, so this is what we're going to do. And then that way you just have a sort of weird catch-22 situation where the only provision you'll get offered is what's there. But if the problem is, so if a young person can't go to school, for example, if what was there worked, then they'd be going to school.
Yeah.
That sounds like an awful situation for a parent to be in. And I've got a couple of Welsh families who have been in exactly that situation, like exactly that. And they've had to go off and pay for private reports. They've had to go and, you know, they've been questioned as to the content of those private reports, as though, you know, paying for their own means paying for their view to be written down, which of course we know is wrong, because any psychologist is bound by their own clinical guide.
Looking for expert guidance in the world of special educational needs and disabilities? Send. Sunshine Academy is your one-stop solution. Gain access to a wealth of knowledge through webinars covering topics like autism and dyslexia, along with tailored learning resources, all for just $10.99 a month. Empower yourself today with Sunshine Academy and take the first step towards a brighter future.
So there's lots of differences, is what we're saying. There's not like a top three. There's just a lot of differences, but also a lot of similarities.
There are, like Kelly said, I think the system is quite broken, and I'm not sure the new ALN Act in Wales is particularly helpful, but I think time remains to show us that, just to be seen if it is actually going to work. Like I say, I have seen some really good examples where I worked with a family where the child did go over to an IDP and actually went from a mainstream primary into a specialist unit attached to a mainstream, and actually the environment was perfect and so much better than he'd had in primary, and the IDP was fantastic and it was well written. So when it's done well, it works well.
And I think that broken system thing is really important, because no matter how good the law is, no matter how clear the law is, the ALN code could be the greatest thing in the world. Ultimately, you still need provision for the children to exist, particularly in the world of mental health. You know, you need, if your child health support or, I don't know, psychotherapy or whatever, we don't have enough psychotherapists or mental health support people, you know, that's the problem. It's actually implementing it. But we could talk about that for ages. Forever. I think we do a lot of that, Sunshine.
We could, and just because you've mentioned it, I'm going to segue into it. You both take cases on both sides of the borders, because we do work remotely quite a lot. I also, although do spend some time in the fantastic Sunshine Hub, work remotely a lot to do too, and it's a really nice way of working. How do you find that benefits families?
The benefits of working remotely.
Do you want to go first? Shall I?
I find, well, for me it's been great, because it means I get to work with a lot of people across the UK now, and I can support, and it means I have a huge variety of cases, which is for me fantastic. So I have a lot of, you know, child protection, a lot of social care cases, a lot of education, and then I can support in Wales too. And as my colleagues are all remote, we can all help each other. And I think for me, it's really proved you can have a close team. And you know, I felt being remote and starting with Sunshine, when I think after 3 weeks we had a meeting in Derby, and I felt like I knew the whole team really, really well. And it was hard because I'd never met them. It was the first time I'd met them. So it's great.
Completely echo that. I think from a family perspective, so most people who know me through Sunshine know that when I started at Sunshine, I had a 5-month-old baby, or no, a bit older than that. By the time I actually started, she was about 10 months. And I'd come from being a head in a special school. So I was sort of feeling I'd completely lost my professional identity. It's what I'd spent my whole adult life forming. And I'd been very active in my job. So I wasn't office office person at my school, I would do lots of running around, lots of people, and all of a sudden that was all gone, and it took a lot of adjustment. And I think I now have 2 babies, so I had another baby since being with Sunshine, and I say this not flippantly, deliberately, but you'd never really know because of how amazingly flexible the role is, of how supportive and empowering my team are around me. Like when I had my second child, he was like grown and born all through working for Sunshine, and my clients, met him when he was brand new and tiny, and we were so flexible about things like feeding, because I was breastfeeding, so I was able to do that. I was able to breastfeeding well past a year because of this job. And then now I can take children to nursery, I can pick them up, I can be there, I can be present. I can structure my whole day around, my family. And what this means is I work at very crazy times, but actually that does work for me, and it works for me in a way that my previous job would never have allowed. And I know that whenever I need it, there's somebody on the end of Teams, someone on the end of the phone, not just to talk work, but just to have 5 minutes of just silliness, or sharing a funny meme, or, I value it so much. You do have to, though, when you work at home, you do have to prioritise your mental well-being in a way that you don't when you actually leave the house. So I found it quite hard to be in my home as a mum of 2 under 3.5, and just look around at the chaos. So I'd sort of be upstairs working, and I'd come down to where my husband had been with the children, and it was like the wreck of the Hesperus, it honestly crazy. And I'd sort of survey and I can't do anything, so I'm like, right, back off to another meeting. And then it's hard to think washing and piles of toys and and also you don't move as much, you don't get out as much. So I'm now much better at structuring in times in my day to make myself move, to make myself go outside, and to prioritize that, because otherwise you do feel like a little bit of a mushroom growing away in the dark, and that's not healthy. So it's taken me a while to get there, and I think combined with having another baby, I think that postpartum, sort of postnatal fog that you're in, you sort of lose yourself, but it's so amazingly worth it. I couldn't ask for anything more in a job, and that fear of losing that professional identity, gone. I feel like I've got a better professional identity now because I have a better balance, and I'm truer to myself, and I'm managing, we all are managing to achieve families that we help. It's just a dream.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's especially the part where you just nip downstairs to grab yourself tea in between tasks, and you're like, oh gosh, why is there Cocoa Pops on the floor? But it's fine.
Why is the cat eating that? Why is the child climbed up on there? Where is my husband? What's going on?
Mine's just like the bomb site downstairs where a 17-year-old's attempted to make an omelette, and you're like, I just ignore that for now, I've got a meeting, okay, go. Or like you say, Kelly, I just think, right, I've got a bit of a break between meetings, I'll just pop around the block with the dog and just have a bit of fresh air. I'm really conscious on doing that. I think my last job I worked hybrid, so I did a lot in my local authority, in and out, but the majority of work, we lost our office during COVID, so I worked a lot from home as well. So, and I like the balance of in and out, but I've still got that with Sunshine, actually. So I've gone out and done some visits and met the community, and then a lot of it is done on the computer and virtual meetings, and it's a good balance. I really like it. I mean, I've had a few local authorities say, no, you can't come on the meeting virtual. And I'm like, well, okay, do you want to pay my travel expenses?
That is one thing I really do find different about Wales and England. It's so happens in person in Wales. And they're really fun sometimes about joining on Teams or whatever. They're almost like an alien concept, which I find really interesting, because of course pre-COVID that was the same in England. The tribunals I did were in person. They were at the local authority courts, or even at the Royal Courts of Justice in London. I did so many tribunals there. Now they're all online, so they're all online. you log. There's no in-person tribunals really at all, apart from perhaps some of the upper tier ones go in person still, but all the first tier tribunals are still very much online. And in Wales, you talk to the tribunals. Oh yeah. Let them know my email address. They can send me a link. Well, what link? We've got to go to the place. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you think that benefits families then, having like the tribunals online rather than in person? Because
I think it's better.
a lot less intimidated if it was on a Zoom or a Teams call, rather than having to go into a room full of people that I
100%
don't know.
100%. I even, for the same as not even tribunals, child protection conferences.
Yeah.
If you think for a parent to go into a room with 10, 12 professionals with their parenting at the centre of this and the harm for the child, then that is so intimidating. And I did lots of conferences pre-COVID where you're in a room and it was so difficult for a parent. When they're done online, the parents cope much better.
Yeah. They can break out in their own space.
Absolutely.
I think that is the biggest thing, because different, like particularly in different local authorities courts, some courts are set up and they really are like a court. You go in, it's a court, and that's really scary. Others are like a dingy back room. If you go to a tribunal at the Royal Courts of Justice in London, you walk into the grandest building ever and you think, wow. And then you go through to what's called the Thomas More building at the back, and it has the worst toilets I've ever been in any sort of official capacity. They're dreadful. And then you go up in this rickety old lift, and then there are these tiny little breakout spaces, if you're lucky enough to get one, for you to sort of talk to your team. And then you go into what amounts to be a really claustrophobic tiny little room, and it's almost like as bad as the really formal courtroom. And you don't feel at home. You don't feel like this is your space. It makes the playing field completely unlevel. Whereas if you're in your home, you can go and make a cup of tea that you like with your own stuff. You know, you've got all of the things you need. It's so much better. Anyway,
you had to deal with travel, the stress of if you're late or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
I can see why it would.
But then you have signal issues on the back of that, don't you? You have some, if there's some technical issues, that can be a bit frustrating and you don't catch something. I find sometimes if you've got a hybrid where you've got, say, some parents that I'm supporting are in the room with the social worker or the education team, and I'm virtual, that can be a little tricky at times.
Hate that. I really hate
hard.
that. Because you have to sort of,
you don't know who's talking. You have to guess who's talking.
Yeah.
So it's much better for one or either in person or
all on Teams,
online, but not that middle ground where some are and some aren't.
Yeah,
absolutely that.
100%.
Completely understand that.
Silliest thing you've heard.
So let's move on to our next section, which is been requested by community. I know we love these suggestions, so do keep them coming. If you go into community and go into general, then you can have a look on there at what's already been suggested and pop your own in. But someone asked, what's the silliest things that you've heard the LA say that's either to you or has been written?
How long have we got, Kat?
You've got about, so pick your favourites.
Okay, I'm going to do a disclaimer, right? Because everyone who works with me knows that I am incredibly empathetic to the struggle of local authority caseworkers. Okay, I am. However, there are some really, really silly things out there which, calls into question, like what on earth are people thinking? So I'll give you one to start off with. This is very recent. I was in a tribunal and the local authority caseworker kept interrupting the judge, which as its own thing is very silly, because you don't interrupt a tribunal judge. You just let them do their thing. And this person was continuing and stuff. And it was the Otis tribunal. And I was setting out what the package ought to be. And the local authority caseworker interrupted me. I just let them do it because I thought, I'm just going to let you crack on interrupting because you're going to get told off in a minute. They did. I'll get to that in a minute. And the local authority caseworker interrupted me mid-flow about package and basically said, well, you can't have that in the package. And I was like, well, why not? Well, it was, what was it? It was something to do with tuition. So it was a particular amount of tuition. She said, well, you can't specify the number of hours tuition in the EOTAS package. And I said, because that's exactly what you do. You exactly specify the amount of tuition hours in the EOTAS package. You can't specify the amount of hours because one week the child might feel like doing 5 and the next week they might feel like doing 10. And I said, okay, by that logic then, it has to be 10 because then they will always have enough there paid for to do. Oh, well, then that would be wasting money because what if they could only do 5? And at that point, the judge interrupted the LA caseworker and was like, you absolutely have to specify provision. You have to know what you're paying for. And the judge actually said to the LA caseworker that they invited the caseworker to have a break to regain control of sense.
Oops.
I was like, oh no. Didn't say anything.
You have to have a great poker face for that though, Kelly, don't you? You have to sit there and I'm not the great, so
I know, it was crazy. Just the concept of not specifying a number of hours in an EOTAS package. Why? How would that package work? Anyway, Rach, have you got any more sillies? Because I've got loads.
I had a recent one. It was also, again, pushing for EOTAS and asking the local authority to finalise the EHCP. Had a meeting with the local authority caseworker and he was very good. He tried. I've got to say they want to try. They're tied as well sometimes, and I see some great local authority caseworkers. And he'd come back and we'd had the meeting and he said, yep, we've finalised we've put it all in. Now the recommendations on the EHCP for the provision in section F were see all professional reports. Now there were a lot of reports. And so I redid it all, redid the lot for the parent, put in all the report recommendations, very good report recommendations for this young person. He came completely all see professional reports. And I said, and he said, oh, and there's one other thing, this EHCP comes with 0 funding.
Oh yeah, that is silly.
Nothing at all. And I said, so can you just tell me what the purpose of the EHCP is if there's no funding? But you went, yeah, there isn't one. That's the final decision. You're going to have to go to your... You know, you said this speech. I'm very, very rarely speechless. Very rarely speechless. And this is not... Crazy. It floored me. I was like...
See, well, you know why then? That makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense. It's all very silly. But that's why they won't put professional reports in there. If they put C professional reports, they don't have to attach funding because the phrase C professional reports isn't provision. And therefore, none of that provision in those reports are actually legally bound to deliver.
Nope.
Ooh.
So I think they're hoping that parent won't go to tribunal, but I can tell you now she very much is.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I guess, you know, it's silly because we know it's silly. But actually, it's an attempt at being quite crafty because you'd think if you weren't knowledgeable about that, you'd read C professional reports and go, oh, they've accepted all my professional reports. Yeah. They absolutely have not accepted your professional reports because they've not funded them. They've not put them in a plan in a legally binding way. It's very frustrating that you're off to appeal because the first thing that will happen is that you'll give your annotations to the tribunal team as the working document and they'll go, okay. It's crazy.
I don't think it'll even get there I think when they notice that she's going to appeal and lodge it, I think they'll back down on that one and change it. But
I had a really silly one where a dog was given provision to do in section F. A dog was given provision. So genuinely. So in section F, a dog, and it wasn't even a trained therapy dog, it was just a staff member's dog that the child happened to like. A dog was listed in the column of who will provide this support as the provider of some of the provisions. So it's something like child will spend 20 minutes a day with school dog, and in the column it just said the dog. And I was like, okay, well, this is actually great in a way because I love the fact that you're saying that you'll devote some time to this child spending time with the dog. However, what happens if the dog's owner leaves and we're left behind with the dog? We need to get this provision right so that we actually think about what the child needs. So what the child needs is some sort of animal experience, preferably the dog. However, the dog can't be listed as the provider of that provision because that's mad.
Looking for expert guidance in the world of special educational needs and disabilities? Send. Sunshine Academy is your one-stop solution. Gain access to a wealth of knowledge through webinars covering topics like autism and dyslexia, along with tailored learning resources, all for just $10.99 a month. Empower yourself today with Sunshine Academy and take the first step towards a brighter future.
But I have got one that's a bit more uplifting, just to end on. A moment where, because I love it, when, can you remember like on Comic Relief years ago where all the newsreaders used to do the funny like skits, and we're all used to newsreaders being quite serious, and you see them doing something all quite nice. Sometimes LA caseworkers can be like that, and you forget that they're human because they're having to do a job that they sometimes don't really like, I think, because they really want to get the best outcomes of children, but they're within certain parameters. Yeah. Anyway, I had a brief glimmer of humanity from somebody who had up until that point been incredibly just quite cold, and I'm not cold, so I had been wearing this person down with heaps of kindness and jolliness, and whilst being firm, fighty but politey. We like to call it.
We love a bit of fighty but politey,
but very politey. So I've been wearing her down, and then we had this meeting with the Senko, and the Senko was a real pain. And then the local authority caseworker said to me, "Oh, can I just grab you for 5 minutes at the end just to talk about a different case?" And I'm thinking, I don't have any other cases with you. Anyway, the Senko went away, and this LA caseworker went, "Oh, thank God you were there." She was a numpty. And I thought, oh, that's a brilliantly silly moment and a lovely human moment from someone who until then had been like ice maiden, and I hadn't been able to work her out. And we had this lovely moment where we were like, we're two humans trying to do the right thing. Yeah. And actually, you know, we understand each other on that. And our relationship then going forward was really good, because every time she was really stony-faced and serious, I knew in her head she was thinking numpty, and I liked it.
I got a really who's got a fantastic personality, really quite sarcastic in the meetings, and she says, and she'll go like, "Oh, Rachel, I can see you smiling. I know that's not good." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you just said the magic words, learning provision, and that's what we're going for." And she was like, "I put it in, Rachel." You know, she's just like, "I know you've got a job to do. I've got my job to do," but it makes it so much easier for the family when you've got, you know, she's the human. You know, this is the world. This is what we can do. There's nothing personal in it, but she's got a really good person, and she's great. I look forward to those meetings with her, because I'm not saying she does the same, but you know, she's got a good
here
way.
Comes Rachel again.
She's like, "Oh God, Rachel's smiling. What's she after now?"
And on that beautiful note, we'll end, so I can let you get back to whatever you were doing. So thank you for joining me today, both of you. I have learned an absolute ton. So I really
great. Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you. It's been awesome as always.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode as much as we've enjoyed recording it for you. If there are any topics you would like to discuss, then absolutely send them over. You can do this in a variety of ways. Find us on social media and send us a message. You can just search Sunshine Support, or you can email us, academy@sunshine-support.org.uk. And if you are already a member of Sunshine Academy, just drop your suggestion into the community area on the platform. If you aren't a member and are listening to this on Spotify or watching us on YouTube, then you can find our Sunshine Academy at www.sunshine-support.org.uk/academy. As always, thank you for listening, and we will be back next month. See you then.